Good evening. Settle in. Allow your body to relax, your thoughts to drift, and your breath to slow. Tonight we journey far back to the dust and stone of ancient Rome, not to the grand banquets or the soaring speeches of emperors, but to the ground beneath their sandals. It's the real Rome. The Rome that was built not in a day, but day by day, stone by stone, by hands now long forgotten. Close your eyes if you wish. Let the hum of history carry you. In this story, there are no battles to follow, no heroes to cheer. Just quiet persistence, gritted teeth, and ingenious minds that turned vision into marble and sweat into roads. Let us begin. This is a road. Roads are very old. They're among the oldest human technologies. We make roads, so we don't have to make trails. Over 40,000 miles of roads. That's more than the length of the earth. The longest road was the Via Appia. Ballestieri is a ghost town, a deserted village in the hills of central Italy. It sits high above the Via Appia. It looks out over rolling farmlands. There's a wind turbine on the hill, and an old water tower with faded red paint. All that work, all that stone, just to make a road. But the effort was worth it. These roads brought Rome wealth, power, and glory. Making a Roman road was hard, dangerous work, and no one got paid. Imagine standing on the edge of a vast stretch of dry earth. The sun hangs high and relentless overhead. There's no shade. Not here, not on this stretch of the Via Publica being carved through the hills. You're a laborer, not enslaved, but not exactly free. Perhaps you're a debt-bound worker, or a local farmer conscripted by civic obligation. You sleep in a makeshift shelter, eat stale bread and lentils, and wake before dawn to the same rhythm. Lift, break, drag, place. Again and again, the work begins with clearing. Trees felled with axes. Earth shoveled away by hand. Surveyors, standing apart in clean tunics, measure angles and gradients with tools like the groma, a simple cross with plumb lines. You do not hold the groma, you hold the pickaxe. You dig. Others follow behind, laying down layers of rubble, gravel, and eventually heavy paving stones, placed with almost ceremonial precision. Roman roads had many layers: the statumen, the rudis, the nucleus, and finally, the summum dorsum, where travelers and chariots would pass. It was advanced engineering, yes. But for you, it's just back-breaking weight. Your feet are blistered from days without proper footwear. Dust clings to your face. You cough often, it's from inhaling powdered limestone. Mistakes are not tolerated. An overseer walks the line with a staff in hand and a sneer in place. If your work is uneven, if the grade is wrong, the stone is pulled up. You begin again, and what of pay? Perhaps you're promised a few denarii at week's end. Perhaps that promise was made a month ago. Perhaps it will come, perhaps not. At night, you fall onto a straw mat, sore in every limb. You can hear the distant laughter of the surveyors at their fire, eating cooked meats and drinking watered wine. You chew dried beans and lie still. Tomorrow, it begins again. But not forever. Rome's roads stretch thousands of miles. Some you will walk again years later as a soldier, or a beggar, or a corpse carried home. Along these roads moved armies and administrators and merchants and slaves. On these roads, Caesar's eagles flew. Along these roads, the sun never set on Rome. In the summer, the grass grows tall. In the winter, there's snow. No one lives here anymore. The town is empty. It was part of their training. But soldiers weren't the only ones who made roads. Peasants and freemen built roads too. They paid taxes and labor. For weeks or months out of the year, they put down their farming tools and picked up picks and shovels and worked on the roads. They slept in the road. They ate food that was brought to them. They worked in all kinds of weather. It ran from the city of Rome to the far southeast, past the Sea of Italy, along the coast of Puglia. There were workshops and shops. People raised sheep in the hills and grew wheat in the fields. But most of all, people worked in the quarries. They did not use mud or clay or anything like that. That stuff is too weak. Romans built a road with stone. To make a Roman road, you start with a trench. You dig a shallow hole, then put a layer of small stones at the bottom, compact the dirt. Next, put in the rudis, the foundation course, big stones, hard and flat. Then you add a layer of gravel, tamp it down, add another layer of stone. This is the statumen, the body of the road. On top of that goes the nucleus, crushed stone, compacted, smooth and level. Finally, the summum dorsum, the upper surface laid with flat stones. And when it's done, you have a road that lasts, that stands up against rain and wind and the wear of chariot wheels. The mountains around Balestrano were full of stone, limestone. The Romans used this stone to build roads. They cut the limestone into blocks with iron tools, then hauled them down the mountain on sleds. Teams of oxen dragged the heavy loads to waiting carts. Then off they went down the mountain. The sound of wheels on dirt, the creak of wagons, the lowing of cattle. It was 381 miles long, longer than any road ever built until the interstate highway system. Trails that go everywhere, roads that go somewhere. This is an ancient Roman road. Roman roads were special. They were straight and they were strong. You could take the army anywhere in the empire. They used them to move grain, wine, marble, slaves, and Caesar's legions. You see those stones? They may have been set 2,000 years ago, but people still use this road today. The Romans built roads all over Europe into North Africa, across the Near East. I want to tell you how the Romans made their roads, but to tell you that story, I need to tell you about a place called Balestrino. But once it was full of life, a market town of several hundred people, a crossroads of trade. At the bottom of the hill, the road began. When the Romans built a road, they built it to last. You'd think the Romans were crazy. These roads were built by soldiers. Well, soldiers in the Roman army were expected to build roads as well as fight. And this is the hardest thing I learned about the Roman roads. No one got paid for making them. The aqueduct had been neglected. That much was certain. How long? How far? Well, here's one way to measure the neglect of Rome's aqueducts. A slow, echoing drop. Drop, drop. The year is 186 CE. The aqueduct supplying the water to the baths of Diocletian has sprung a leak. Fixing a broken aqueduct or a collapsed road was not the kind of job that could be done quickly. First, they cleared debris and rubble from the aqueduct. Then they measured the damage. Given the complexity of the aqueduct system, there could be any number of problems. Had the pipe cracked? Was the channel eroded? Had the arches collapsed? The series exploring the Eternal City is available now. Click below to subscribe and get a special offer. The answers mattered because fixing a broken pipe was very different from reinforcing an arch. Once they had a sense of the problem's scope, the engineers could estimate how long the repairs would take. Not weeks or days, mind you, but years. Still, the good news was that aqueducts rarely failed completely. Usually some of the channels remained intact. While the engineers worked on the others, the water would keep flowing, albeit with reduced pressure. That meant that the city wouldn't have to go without water entirely, but it did mean that the flow would be unpredictable. After all, these were not fly-by-night construction projects. They were monuments meant to last for centuries. Only the most basic needs were met. For everyone else, the public baths, fountains, and pools were out of bounds. The shops stayed open, the gladiators kept training, and the emperor still held court. But everyone knew that things would not be normal until the aqueduct was fixed. Emperor and pauper alike had to make do with unflushed toilets, dirty streets, and yes, rationed water. Still, given the public outcry, the emperor could not afford to wait forever. For urgent repairs, he turned to a special group of workers known as Intrepid's Fearless Ones. Their work was dangerous and unpleasant, cleaning latrines, repairing sewers, and patching roads, often at night to avoid the midday heat. To these men, the fallen aqueduct was just another stinky job. Somewhere in the vast network of pipes bringing water into the city, a trickle has become a steady drip. Drop, drop, out. The leak itself may be small, but the consequences are not. Out. Water, after all, is heavy. Over time, it erodes the soil, undermining the road above. Soon the aqueduct, the Via Appia, the Via Sacra, they all buckle and break. This is how long it took the Romans to bring water into the city. This is how long it took them to bring water into the city after an earthquake. And this is how long it took them to bring water into the city after an aqueduct collapsed. So let's take a closer look at what happens when aqueducts fail. You know the sound of rushing water, the lifeblood of the ancient city. But now imagine the sound of dripping water. If that sounds dramatic, well, it is. But also, sorry, it's true. 2,000 years ago, a sewer line broke under the Forum. Imagine the scene. You're walking across the Forum, perhaps on your way to the public latrines, or maybe just out for a stroll on this fine summer afternoon. When suddenly, whoa, the ground gives way. Wastewater splashes up around you. You scramble back as more and more people pour onto the street, drawn by the commotion. The crowd surges, and you elbow a senator in the chest. You both jump as a bronze statue tumbles off its pedestal, narrowly missing you. In the distance, you see someone slip and fall into the open sewer. The stench rises up, mixing with the dust of the road and the sweat of the crowd. As you finally break free of the throng, you catch a glimpse of a soldier trying in vain to plug the opening with a shield. It's no use. The damage is done. The urine and human waste keeps spraying into the air, coating passers-by in filth. Even worse, because the toilets in Rome were shared public facilities, the broken sewer soon becomes a health hazard. People fall sick, some fatally. Smallpox, cholera, typhoid fever, they spread through the city like wildfire. But don't worry, help is on the way. Well, sort of. So while senators caroused in taverns, complaining bitterly about the lack of water for their baths, the intrepid began their work. When the water pressure dropped, bathhouses closed, fountains ran dry, and housewives hurried home with empty jars. And yet, despite all these inconveniences, life went on. This is the story of Rome. Concrete. You've walked beside it. You've seen buildings and bridges crumble before your eyes. You've marveled at the Pantheon's dome, still uncracked after 2 millennia, or the seawalls at Caesarea Maritima, still resisting tides after 1,500 years. This tuff contained pulverized volcanic glass, a natural pozzolana. Concrete was born when lime and pozzolana mixed. These ingredients underwent a chemical reaction. Calcium hydroxide from the lime and silicon dioxide from the pozzolana reacted to form calcium silicate hydrate. In the Middle Ages, people rediscovered how to make Roman concrete by experimenting, by trial and error. They're looking for answers. What were the precise ratios of each ingredient? How was the concrete mixed? How long did it take to cure? What was the consistency? How were the different layers put in place? Thank you for watching this video. How did the concrete interact with the stones? Some scientists have successfully recreated the formula and are testing samples. Others have found that the traditional method of adding pozzolana improved the durability of concrete. Still, there is much we don't know. The Romans didn't leave us any instructions. And unlike today, they weren't making huge uniform projects with standardized ingredients. Each batch of concrete may have been slightly different. Each builder may have added a little something extra, but the secret was out. During the Renaissance, scientists began to study its composition, trying to replicate its strength. In the 18th century, they identified the key ingredient. Pozzolana was thought to be a special kind of sand that could create a stronger concrete. In fact, it was pulverized volcanic glass. This gel filled microscopic cracks and acted as a glue between aggregate particles. Over time, crystals grew, filling larger cracks and making the concrete stronger. Its durability increased with age, especially in salt water. To make Roman concrete today, we need to know what volcanic ash was like in antiquity, what lime and pozzolana were like in antiquity. We also need to know how the Romans collected, prepared, and mixed the materials, how they laid the concrete, how they cured it, how they waited for it to become strong. That knowledge has been lost. It's time to listen to the past. We can still see the results of Roman patience. We can marvel at their engineering genius. But we must also understand their methods. Unlike today, they weren't focused on efficiency or speed. They trusted materials, time, and process. They knew how to wait. So the longer it sat, the tougher it got. Yet modern concrete made with Portland cement crumbles in decades. Why? Because ancient concrete contains ingredients that modern concrete lacks. Let's travel back to Imperial Rome to build their massive public works. Romans mixed lime with water, but also with pozzolana, a fine ash gathered near Mount Vesuvius. But the recipe wasn't the same everywhere. Some formulas called for ground brick or crushed tiles instead of ash. Others were mixed dry, others wet. The knowledge wasn't uniform. Most Roman concrete was created by mixing lime and pozzolana near Vesuvius. There are no surviving formulas. Knowledge of the art was not written down. It was passed from master to apprentice, like an oral tradition, and the quality varied. Still, the Romans used concrete for over 500 years. building everything from small shrines to large public works. They built harbors and roads, aqueducts and arches, fountains and tombs. They even resurfaced the road from Naples to Rome with concrete. To learn how to make Roman concrete, you had to serve an apprenticeship. First, you'd gather the materials, then you'd mix them. Next, you'd lay the concrete, press it into place, and allow it to bond with stone. Finally, you'd smooth the surface. Each step required skill. Each ingredient had to be the right quality. After the fall of the empire, the knowledge of how to create this superior concrete was lost. Today, scientists are still analyzing cores taken from Roman breakwaters. The reason Roman concrete endured is because of local materials and know-how. It's here for the Great Courses Plus. Are you tired of the endless cycle of backbreaking labor? Waking up every day to roll up your sleeves and dive into another grueling shift? Are you sick of coming home covered in the grime and sweat of manual labor, dreaming of a life with a little more comfort and refinement? Let us begin your transformation from common laborer to respected architect right now. Your day begins early, but not with physical labor. Ah, no. The first light filters through the columns of your villa as you study blueprints. It's not quite like ours, but diagrams scratched onto wax tablets or papyrus. And beauty, all while keeping an eye on the slave who is diligently scratching the wax tablet with a stylus. Ah, perfect. Exactly what I was thinking. Outside, workers still labor under the fading sun, but your work is done for the day. So sit back, relax, and think ahead to the next basilica, the next temple facade, the next great architectural marvel that will bend the very city to your will. Today you have a new villa to design for a recently ennobled senator, public bathhouse to plan, and a triumphal arch to oversee, but for the music of language that you'll echo in your next column design. You rise and dress, not in a toga, but in a tunica, angusticlavia, a long-sleeved tunic belted at the waist. It's more suited for work than the velum or short-sleeved tunic favored by the common folk. Until next time, remember, Rome was not built in a day, but neither was it built in a lifetime. You are not a builder. No, not you. You are a planner, a conductor. In marble and shadow, your mind becomes a monument. Well then, put down those tools, my friend. Because today, we are giving you the opportunity to live the life of an elite Roman architect through the power of high quality. These are your workhorse items, so choose wisely. After all, this is the only outfit you'll need for your entire career as an architect. Oh, and don't forget your sandals, my friend. Wouldn't be a Roman dig without sandals. Oh yes, now let us end, not in sweat and stone dust, but with ink and parchment. Not in the ditch, but on the portico. Upon arrival, greet your foremen and inspectors, then walk among the foundations. The columns, the arches, the spandrels, the coffers and vaults, nodding your head with approval when all is done according to plan. But a slight misalignment here. A poorly executed arch there. Imperfections that need your expert eye to catch them. Correct a misaligned arch. Instruct the carving of capitals in the Corinthian style. Remind a supplier that you wanted the finest Numidian stone, not this cheap local travertine. You are a Roman architect, a patrician, well-born, well-read, and quietly powerful. I'll make sure to accessorize with a scroll or two and a small pouch filled with tools like a miniature ruler and stylus. Now you travel to the construction site in a litter carried by slaves, or perhaps an early version of a jeep, because even architects have their entourages. And finally, return home to dictate notes to a scribe, perhaps referencing the great Vitruvius, whose treatise on architecture blends proportion, function. Now, lunch is a light affair. Some cheese, fruit, perhaps some dormice if you're feeling indulgent, followed by poetry, not for pleasure alone. As the afternoon wanes, you might stop by a bookshop to pick up a copy of Catullus, or perhaps Persius, and recline to digest your food and absorb the wisdom of the ancients. You do not touch stone, yet stone bends to your will. Rome is waiting, architect. Will you answer her call? Thank you for playing. If you enjoyed this experience, please like and subscribe for more historical tales, including more adventures in ancient Rome. And so, as we return from ancient Rome, let the images gently fade. The scrape of chisels, the cool echo of aqueduct tunnels, the weight of stone lifted again and again by unseen hands, in sweat, silence, and surprising elegance. Rome wasn't built in a day. It was built in layers, in lines drawn and redrawn. Its aqueducts still hum faintly in the fountains of Rome. And though that world is long gone, its roads still lie beneath our highways. Its concrete still holds the sea at bay. Let that thought comfort you, that something made with care, even in difficulty, can outlast even time. Now rest, traveler. Let sleep come gently, like water flowing through the aqua marcia, steady, ancient, and serene. You are far from the dust and sun. Good night. Welcome, as the world quiets and the night draws near. Allow yourself to drift across distant grasslands, through time and silence. Let the cold wind of the steppe brush softly past your thoughts, and the rhythm of hooves fade into memory. Into the quiet, persistent world that gave rise to an empire. A world shaped by smoke, felt ritual and wind. We are going to the Mongol encampment. Tonight we journey not to the battlefields of history, but into the spaces between them. It's not as conquerors, not as warriors, but as people, living day-to-day in tents that moved with the seasons, under skies that knew no borders. For portraits, gentle and detailed, will unfold. A day in a yurt, the mind of a military genius, is the mystery of a vanished tomb, and the hidden strength of a noblewoman. Together, we'll explore what it truly meant to live in this space. Let's begin. Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to imagine ourselves as a nomad in Mongolia. We will take on the challenges and complete the daily tasks of the nomadic tribes that call this land home. But fair warning, you won't have an easy time of it. If you don't know how to ride a horse properly, you'll fall off. Using a long bamboo herding flute, you coax them into a loose flock, calling out occasional commands to keep them moving. Eventually, after much walking, the animals are returned to the enclosure near camp, where other family members are already skinning and cleaning the day's kill. One to wrangle the sheep or two to help with the morning chores. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe for more epic stories delivered right to you every week. And for more adventures in history's greatest civilizations, check out the series on our channel. Each week we bring you new stories set in ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, Rome, China, and beyond. Our series are crafted by historians with original music and sound design to fully immerse you in the past. Start exploring today. Why are you still here? Please pick one. Come on, please leave. Blood runs down the sides of the weathered wood, dripping into a bucket below. Once the hide is removed, the carcass is cut into chunks and strung up to be dried in the sun. You wash your hands in a basin of cold water, then help prepare the next day's rations by chopping vegetables. Some you will eat right away, such as the crisp lettuce leaves and juicy tomatoes. Others you will pickle for preservation, tossing cucumbers and cabbage into a brine of salt and water. Then you and the others sit down to a meal of dried meat and pickles, dipping pieces into bowls of milk. The adults discuss plans for the coming weeks when the family plans to move to summer pasture. Soon the men will drive the herds toward greener, lusher grazing lands. The women will dismantle the yurts, load supplies on horses, and care for the children. Work will continue long after sunset, so no one volunteers to end the evening with milking the animals. This is necessary even if the family has collected milk from previous milking. Mares will often kick up their heels and snort in agitation. Cows are slow to let down their milk, so patience is required. Finally, as darkness falls, you stoke up the central fire and huddle close against the yurt walls to ward off the chill. Children play at your feet, their laughter echoing strangely in the dim lamplight. Overhead, the sky remains unchanged, endless and watching. You can't shoot straight, you'll miss your target. Maybe it is, but the nomads who live this life wouldn't trade it. They are some of the happiest people on earth. If you're squeamish about blood and guts, you might not want to do this at all. If you think you have what it takes, let's begin. You wake just before the sun breaches the horizon. The inside of the yurt, a circular tent made of felt lattice wood, is dim and smoky. The fire at the center has burned low. Its warmth lingers faintly in the air, but the cold of the Mongolian dawn presses in from every crevice. Your breath forms mist as you sit up. The walls are made of lattice wood covered in layers of felt, sometimes patched and stiff from weathering the elements. Outside, the wind carries the dry scent of grass and the low grumbling of restless horses. Your first task is to tend to those horses. You step outside into the crisp, open world. There are no walls, only space, vast and stretching, as far as the eye can see. The horses need checking. Their hobbles have chapped and stiffened from the night's rest. You kneel down and carefully undo the knots, working methodically to ensure none of the leather thongs snap back and hurt your hands. You stand, stretch, and yawn widely. First, you must see to the horse's water. The stream nearby might be frozen solid, so you take the led mare by the halter, urging her forward with soft words and gentle prods. Her breath plumes in the chill air as she walks. Reaching the stream, you check the ice jam across its surface, but there is open water below. The horses drink deeply and gratefully, shaking their heads to free their ears and rumps. As they finish, you gather up the discarded hobbles, slinging them over your shoulder. It's time to return to camp, to rouse the others from sleep and get the day's chores underway. After breakfast, you head out to the pastures to round up the scattered sheep and goats. They scatter at your approach, bleating loudly. If you've made it this far, you're probably thinking this experience would be unbearable. It's time for you to test your skills. Can you wrangle the herd without panicking? Click on screen now to choose your adventure. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. It is difficult for us to comprehend the extent of Subutai's influence. We know it when we look at a map. The red stains of his conquests cover more than half of Asia and 20% of the landmass of the entire world. This isn't a record of destruction held by another conqueror, not even close. It's twice the size of Alexander the Great's domain, and 3 times that of Genghis Khan himself. Here was a man sending him a bloody head as a gift. How could anyone behave like that? It's only someone with supreme confidence, someone who wasn't afraid of Genghis Khan. Intrigued, the Great Khan assembled his warriors and rode to Subutai's camp. The two leaders met face to face, and it is said that Genghis Khan liked what he saw. Subutai, for his part, was terrified. In 1231, he fought at the Battle of the Kalka River, where the Mongols defeated a combined Russian, Polish, and Hungarian force. This victory would open the door to Europe, and Subutai would play a major role in expanding Mongol influence on the continent. He fell to his knees before Genghis and confessed his crime. His legacy lived on through those who had served under him. Every year on the anniversary of his death, families gather together to honor the memory of the great conqueror. They remember a man who was born not into greatness, but into discipline. He was a man who taught them the secrets of movement and showed them the strength of strategy. He was a warrior who didn't need bloodlust to fuel his victories, and whose genius lay not just in charge, but in withdrawal. He was a man of few words who preferred action to boast. A man who fought while others slept, who planned his victories long before the drums of war were sounded. He was a man who ordered simultaneous attacks hundreds of miles apart, who used feints and lures and deception. He was a man who saw war not as a whirlwind of steel and fury, but as a slow game of breath and patience. He was a man who aged without ceremony, no golden palace, no throne. He preferred the open sky to the clamor of the court. He was a man who loved the land so much that even in his afterlife, he wished to remain beneath it, beneath the open sky. He had trained many great generals, but none would equal his brilliance. No monument marks the place, only the memory of the land remembers. When Bata died, he left behind a shattered tent, a widow, and a newborn son. His legacy was carried forward by his son, also named Bata, who went on to conquer Poland and Hungary. However, the elder Subutai never saw his grandson's triumphs. "I died believing himself to be a failure." His last letter to Ogodai revealed his troubled mind. "I am not worthy," he wrote, "to be counted among the servants of the house of Genghis Khan." He requested to be buried under the ground of his homeland, away from the grandeur of the imperial court. His wish was granted, and his body was laid to rest in Mongolia. But the place remained a secret until the 1930s, when it was discovered by a team of archaeologists. And yet, despite his victories, Subutai's heart wasn't in it anymore. By the mid-1230s, he began requesting leaves of absence from Ogodai, claiming illness, but really longing for the quiet of his homeland. Others in the Khan's court accused him of cowardice, but Ogodai respected his servant and granted him his wish. But the peace didn't last long. But the new Khan wasn't interested in vengeance. Instead, he offered Subutai a choice: either join me or die. Once again, The call to arms went out, and Subutai felt compelled to answer. He rode to meet the Jiannu army and achieved a decisive victory at the Battle of the River RLC. But shortly thereafter, the unthinkable happened. Subutai fell ill and died on the field. It is said that when the shaman doctors of Karakoram examined his body, they could find nothing wrong with him. According to legend, Subutai was cursed by a shaman during the siege of Samarkand. Whether this is true or not, his death was a devastating blow to the Mongols. Batum, who had succeeded his father as the ruler of the Mongol Empire, was inconsolable. And so Subutai found himself fighting alongside the very army he had tried to destroy. It seems impossible that a man of humble origins could have accomplished so much. Together they would lead the Mongol army to its first great victories. Subutai fought with distinction at the battles of the River Kalka and the siege of Bukhara, showing the world the value of mobility and archery over massed armor and blunt force. Even then, his talents were being noticed. Other Khans wanted him on their side. The Subutai had pledged to Genghis Khan, and none could match the ambition of the growing Mongol Empire. But if we were to take a step back from the maps, zoom out and study the campaigns themselves, we see the true source of Batu's greatness. Rival princes disputed the succession, and the Karakoram was thrown into chaos. Once again, though, Subutai rose to the occasion. With a handful of loyalists, he seized control of the capital and enthroned Ogedei as the new Great Khan. Having secured the succession, Subutai was rewarded. He was given the Princess Sorgatani as his wife, a member of Genghis Khan's royal harem and one of the most intelligent women in the empire. It was an unusual marriage, but they were an effective team. She accompanied him on campaign, helping to manage his household and coordinate with the other Khans. What we find is efficiency. Of all the men who rode with the Mongol war machine, there were few who had a better understanding of movement than Subutai. The Khwarezmians under Shah Muhammad II had rebelled against Mongol rule, and it was up to Subutai to crush the uprising. After a swift march, Subutai and his army arrived at the city of Samarkand. Aware that his rival Batuman was approaching from the south, Subutai divided his forces and left the siege to his second-in-command. Then he rode out to meet Batuman's army in the field. The two Mongol wings almost collided, and there's no telling what might have happened had Subutai not personally ridden between them, ordering them to stand down. Once reunited, Subutai continued his advance, chasing the retreating Khwarezmians toward the Amu Darya River. There, at the Battle of the River Indus, he crushed the Khwarezmians decisively. Buman chased the fleeing Shah Muhammad II all the way to the gates of his capital, destroying everything in his path. For Subutai, the campaign was a personal triumph. He had proven that the Mongol army could fight as well as they could ride. When we think of ancient battles, we imagine massive walls of men crashing into each other, a whirlwind of steel and fury. To understand how Subutai became the greatest Mongol conqueror, we must travel back to the Mongolian steppe in the late 1100s. The young Temujin had just seized the title of Genghis Khan after defeating his rivals in a pitched battle. As he consolidated his power, he sent messengers across the land to assemble loyal warriors under his banner. One such messenger traveled to the dwelling of Subutai, a local chieftain who was known for his martial skills. But when the messenger asked Subutai to bend the knee to Genghis Khan, he was rebuffed. And not just rebuffed, but insulted. Enraged, the messenger drew his sword and charged Subutai, who cut him down with a single stroke. Though Subutai had killed the messenger, he knew he was in trouble, so he did something desperate. He took the severed head of the messenger and sent it to Genghis Khan with a letter explaining what had happened. What he hoped would be a message of apology turned out to be a declaration of war. But such battles weren't the style of the Mongols. They preferred a game of breath and patience. And the master of this was Subutai. He was a general whose victories came from planning, logistics, intelligence, strategy, and above all, flexibility. He coordinated simultaneous attacks across hundreds of miles. He lured his enemies into traps and then smashed them. He even used trickery and espionage. The man was an assassin long before he ever met Genghis Khan. In fact, he had attempted to kill his future boss twice. We can only imagine the look on Genghis Khan's face when he received that package. He had met his match in Genghis Khan. Both were supreme commanders. Both loved the thrill of the chase, and both were brilliant tacticians. After Genghis Khan's death in 1227, the empire nearly fractured. Soon, however, war would come again. The next few years would be a whirlwind. Subbatai launched campaign after campaign, driving the Khwarezmians from the field and besieging their cities. By this point, he was a legend. His name struck terror into the hearts of men, and stories of his exploits were sung from Korea to Hungary. In 1241, word reached Karakoram that the Khans of Western Shia were stirring. As we said, few names are spoken with as much quiet awe among the Mongols as Subbatai. Today, little remains of Subbatai's grave. His legacy is preserved in the hearts and minds of the Mongols. Now, under that open sky, somewhere in the plains of Mongolia, lie the bones of the great Subbatai. It is perhaps the most whispered mystery of Central Asia. Where lies the great Khan? Genghis Khan died in 1227. Where exactly? No one can say for certain. It's a story that has endured through the centuries, one of the most famous mysteries of Central Asia. Genghis Khan, the founder of the Mongol Empire, died on August 18, 1227. And where he was buried remains a secret known only to a handful of people. The stories vary. Some say he fell from his horse. Others claim illness. A few speak of betrayal. Some believe that he was buried in a cave somewhere in the mountains, and others thought that his tomb was in a more traditional style. In 2006, for example, a team of researchers claimed to have found a possible location for the tomb near a mountain lake in Mongolia's Kentai Mountains. They claimed to have found a large underground structure that may have been a tomb. But once again, there was no physical evidence to confirm their findings. They based their theory on a combination of historical records, geographical analysis, and local legends. However, their claims were disputed by other experts who pointed out that there was no physical evidence to support their theory. Others believe that his tomb is under a river or a cave somewhere in the mountains. For now, the mystery remains unsolved, adding to the legend of one of the greatest leaders of all time. But despite all the searching, nothing was found until recently. In 1923, a Mongolian folktale told of a hidden cave where the Great Khan was laid to rest. This led to the first modern search for his tomb in 1924. An expedition set out to find the cave described in the tale, but they were unsuccessful. Some historians say that he was the victim of an arrow wound after a skirmish with a nomadic tribe. Others claim that he contracted illness after falling into a river. There are even theories that he was poisoned by his own brother Batu, who wished to take the throne. After all, his empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe, and his tomb would have been a target for many. Others believe that the secrecy was intentional, a way to keep his legacy alive by making his final resting place a mystery. Please like and share this video, and subscribe for more stories like this. See you next time. Bye. But the mystery deepens when we try to learn more about his burial. But the greater mystery is what followed. According to legend, his funeral procession was vast. To keep his burial site hidden, it is said that everyone who saw it was killed, that horses trampled the land to hide the fresh earth, that a river was diverted over his grave, that the forest was sealed. Modern archaeologists have searched. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, oral traditions, all have been explored. Some believe he lies in the Khenti Mountains in Mongolia. Others think he rests beneath rivers or caves. And yet no tomb has been found. Perhaps it was by design to keep his soul from disturbance. To ensure he returned fully to the earth, not as a relic, but as part of the land that raised him. In this way, Genghis remains where he always lived, in motion, in myth, in wind. Hello and welcome to this channel. Today we're going to talk about Genghis Khan, specifically his death and the mystery around his burial. The history books tell us that Genghis Khan died in 1227 after being injured from a fall off a horse. According to the official histories, Genghis's body was taken back to his birthplace near the Anan River in present-day Mongolia. But the details get hazy after that. What is clear is that his burial site was kept top secret. Historians tell us that anyone who saw the burial ground was put to death, and the area was hidden from the world ever since. The traditional history says that after his burial, the area was trampled by horses to flatten the ground, that a river was diverted to flow over his grave, and that the forest around it was sealed off to prevent anyone from finding the site. For centuries, the world looked for Genghis Khan's tomb. Over the years, various expeditions and scholars have come forward with new theories and potential locations for the burial site. In 2010, another team of researchers used satellite imaging and ground-penetrating radar to search for the tomb in the Kentai Mountains. Some believe that the secrecy surrounding Genghis Khan's burial was to protect his remains from grave robbers. Where Genghis Khan is buried still remains unknown, though some believe he is in the Kentai Mountains in Mongolia. What do you think? Is there anything we missed? Let us know in the comments below. Now, imagine yourself wrapped in thick furs, sitting within the quieter half of the yurt. You are a noblewoman, a wife, but not a silent figure behind a powerful man. And nowhere is this more true than in The Way of the Horse, where I got to explore the world of the Eurasian steppes in the 13th century. For those who don't know, this is the first book in my Burning Kingdoms series. I didn't want to marry just anyone, but I wanted to marry a strong, intelligent, capable woman. So I looked to my partner, my amazing wife, the love of my life, and I asked her what it meant to be a wife to her. They faced many hardships, including frequent moves, the ever-present danger of war and raids, and the harsh weather conditions of the steppes. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this. Till next time, remember to stay curious, keep learning, and always ask, why not? Both were written with the fantastic support of my patrons. If you'd like to help support these videos and get access to a whole bunch of perks, including early access to all my books, free short stories, and even the occasional mistake, please consider becoming a patron. The link is in the description. Thank you for watching. But they were strong, resourceful women who were able to handle these challenges and still maintain their freedom and independence. And that's something that I really admire. And then weaving that into the story of The Way of the Horse, I was able to create a character that felt real to me. It takes place in the world of my Emperor's Edge series, but 150 years before. And while that was certainly true for some, it wasn't true for all. The thing I keep coming back to in my research is the freedom that women on the steppe had. They could travel with their families, setting up camp and moving with the herds. They were expected to be proficient horse riders and could participate in hunting. They were also expected to manage the household when the men went off to war or to hunt, which meant that they were in charge of organizing supplies and making sure everything ran smoothly. And if the husband died, the wife could even take over his role as head of the family. In fact, in some cases, women could even initiate a divorce if they weren't happy in their marriage. A young Mongol woman who wins a noble horse in a competition and sets out to find her champion to ride it in battle. Along the way, she faces dangers, discovers secrets, and learns what it means to be a warrior in a world that tells her she isn't one. In Mongol society, noble women held surprising influence. You manage the camp when the men are at war. You organize supplies, command servants, and negotiate marriages. Your dowry was not jewelry, but herds. You were married not for beauty alone, but for alliances, bloodlines, and strength. May take part in religious ceremonies. The Mongols held deep respect for the spiritual world. You may be a keeper of shamanic knowledge, calling on spirits to protect your clan. You ride, you hunt, you survive. You instruct your daughters to do the same. At night, you tell stories of the ancestors, of the great riders, of the spirits in the sky. Your voice is low, steady, and rhythmic, like the hoofbeats of a slow journey. You are not soft, though you are kind. You are not forgotten, though you stay behind. You are the still point in a turning world. I've always loved writing historical fiction because through the work, I get to step into times and places quite different from my own. Now, when I wrote The Way of the Horse, I wanted to make sure that I portrayed the women of the time period accurately. I did tons of research into what life was like for women in various cultures of the Eurasian steppes, and I was surprised by what I found. Contrary to what I had expected, life for these women was not terrible. They were allowed many freedoms that women in other places could only dream of. But to truly capture that in the book, I needed to have a female perspective. So I turned to my critique partners, amazing authors Rebecca Ross and Emily Skretsky, and asked for their thoughts. And they pointed out something that was obvious once it was said, but before that I had completely overlooked. Neither of them were married, so neither really had experience with what it meant to be a wife, and that's when it hit me. I would marry someone. When we think of the wives of the Mongolian steppe, we often picture women who are subservient to their husbands, who spend all their time bearing children and managing the household. Of course, this doesn't mean that life was easy for these women. Thank you for watching this video and for joining me on this journey through time and history. The Mongol Empire roared across continents, but beneath the roar was a whisper, of fires lit and felt tense, of sour milk and coarse hands, of roads unseen and rituals unbroken. You are not fleeing, you are resting. Tonight, we remember not the conquerors, but the quiet lives behind them. The stable master, the strategist, the secret. As your breath softens and your thoughts begin to wander, let the wind of the steppe carry you. Let the sky above you stretch without end. You are not riding. Good night. Sleep well. Settle in. Let your breath slow. Tonight, we are going back further than pyramids or marble statues. We're going to where human history first carved itself into permanence, the soft, damp clay. Imagine yourself beneath a pale, baking sun in the cradle of civilization, ancient Mesopotamia. A place of reeds and riverbanks, bustling markets, goat pens, and mud brick temples. A place where the most powerful tool was not a sword or a spear, but a reed stylus, pressing wedge-shaped marks into clay. This episode, like a slow, winding river, will take you through 4 parts of Mesopotamian life, each one revealing the quieter truths of a world long gone. From the daily struggles of apprentice scribes to the poetry of a silenced priestess, from a story older than the Bible to the sumptuous rituals of Akkadian elites. So, close your eyes if you wish. Let the rhythm of the past carry you. Let's begin. Hello, friends. Imagine you at home in bed and the phone rings and the person on the other side of the line tells you that you have won $1 million. So you think this is a prank call. But then you hear the sincerity in the voice of that caller and you realize that you have really won the lottery. You wake up in a cold sweat because you just had a dream. It was such a vivid dream that you can still see it in your mind's eye. Was it a premonition? Could you have actually won the lottery? Or was it just a dream? Dreams are strange. Imagine waking before the sun rises over the low rooftops of your Ornipper. And if you liked this story, please be sure to leave us a comment telling us what you thought about it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. The air is already warm, and dust clings to your skin.
Ow.
You are 13. Your job is not to herd goats or sweep the courtyard. No. You are apprenticed to a scribe. You shuffle into the Edaba, the scribal school. There are no desks, just benches and packed earth floors. Other boys huddle around low tables, clutching their most essential tools. A small tablet of still damp clay and a reed stylus carved to a point. You sit, knees tucked beneath you, and begin the day's task. Copying the same phrase over and over in cuneiform, the stylus splits. Again, you curse softly under your breath. The clay is too dry, and the lines crack. Your teacher, a man with permanent ink stains under his fingernails, shuffles past, inspecting the lines. Too crooked, he says. Do it again. And so you do. You press your stylus again and again. Grain shipments, sheep counts, tax records, names, inventories, oaths. You are training to become the memory of the city. The back of your neck burns, your shoulders ache.
Oh.
But you must go on. One day, if you do well, you may be hired by a temple or even by the royal court. Scribes are few. They are respected. But they are never rich. May end up counting barley for hours, tracking debts owed by farmers, and documenting births and deaths. Your writing must be exact. One wrong wedge, and a shipment might go to the wrong town. Mistakes mean punishment. Sometimes physical, sometimes worse. Humiliation. It's being sent to the lowest of jobs. Being made to erase your own work with spit and shame. Still you persist. Because the stylus is power. To write is to remember, to control, to shape. You glance up from your tablet. Teacher calls out a new sentence. You press the reed into the clay. And the world, for a brief moment, listens. Some are nightmares, and others make absolutely no sense whatsoever. And then there are those dreams where you're falling and falling forever. But what does that mean? Let's explore that in today's episode of Lost and Found. And now, back to our regularly scheduled program. Scribes were an elite group of people who were responsible for keeping written records of everything that happened in society. For example, many clay tablets which served as student homework have been discovered. Thankfully, modern technology has made it easier than ever to find inspiration online. Now, just like those students in ancient Mesopotamia, you could get lost in the pages of amazing stories written by talented authors just like you. Once you join, you can start sharing your stories and getting feedback from other writers. With over 2 million readers and writers, Readsy is definitely the place for you to share your work and get the feedback that you deserve. These texts show us that young scribes would spend their days copying texts. This is a practice still used today in schools all over the world. Can you think of any other professions where students copy experienced workers? Share your thoughts below. Scribes played a vital role in the functioning of the state. They were highly respected, although not necessarily wealthy members of society. However, they were almost exclusively male, as women were largely excluded from the profession. While we don't know much about these Mesopotamian scribes, we do know about how they've spent their days thanks to the work of archaeologists. If you want to be a better writer, you need to read lots of books, and you need to write every single day. The title of this story is You Are Hired. Let's jump in. What did you think of this story? Did it remind you of a dream that you once had? Sure hope so. Let us now drift gently from dusty schoolyards to candlelit temples. In Hijuana, her name still echoes down through 4,000 years. Daughter of Sargon the Great, priestess of the moon god Nana, poet of Inanna's fury. She lived in the 23rd century BCE, at a time when cities warred and dynasties rose like reeds in floodwater. And Hijuana was a calm, clear voice amid the storm. By day, she oversaw temple rites. Priests and priestesses gathered in the dim oil lamplight, incense smoke curling up through the gloom, bronze bowls clinking against stone altars, the murmur of prayers mingling with the gentle splash of water drawn from the sacred well. She was both terrible and tender, both life-giving and death-dealing. Sometimes she found work, a lowly servant in a lord's house, tending goats on a hillside, gleaning grain after the harvest. No matter how rough the surface, she wrote on it. No matter how obscure the prophet, she spoke to him. Soon word spread. Rumor travels fast on the desert wind. People came from miles around to hear the poems of the exiled princess, the songs of the homeless priestess. They gathered at dusk when the sun bled orange and purple across the sky, sitting cross-legged on the ground before her. They found their way into liturgies, too, and were whispered in the dim oil lamplight by acolytes chanting incantations in praise of Inanna. Her exile was bitter, yet her voice remained clear, etched in clay. Is it epic battles or soaring cathedrals? We tend to think of greatness in grand terms, empires, pyramids, epics, yet the true soul of a people lies in its stories. Look around you. Who do you see? Everyday people trying to live extraordinary lives. That is where greatness truly lies. Survive the tumblers of time, the upheavals of empire, the ravages of war. Listening intently while she spoke of storms and sailing ships of sheep and exalted kings of death and resurrection. The exact circumstances surrounding her exile are unknown, but it seems to have been a sudden and unexpected event that caught her off guard. The hymn of the descent of Inanna tells the story of her banishment, and it's clear that she was deeply affected by the loss of her position and status. She may have traveled to different temples and shrines, leading religious ceremonies and teaching others about Mesopotamian religion. Her hymns have survived for thousands of years, providing invaluable insights into Mesopotamian religion, culture, and society. They're considered a masterpiece of ancient literature and continue to be studied and admired by scholars today. Her hymns suggest that she remained deeply connected to the divine, and she continued to find inspiration and solace in her faith. Wherever she went, she heard the whispers, saw the knowing looks, felt the cold dread that clutched at every passerby. She drew on her personal experiences, including her banishment, to infuse her poetry with a raw emotion and honesty that resonated with her audience. Her hymns were copied and circulated widely. She became known throughout Mesopotamia for her powerful voice and evocative storytelling. As she spoke, her voice ringing with power, the nobles bowed their heads. What stories will you tell? Whose voices will you amplify? History remembers what you choose to remember. She was no longer the king's daughter, yes, but she was also no one's property. Her hymns are a testament to the power of faith and the importance of preserving cultural heritage. As we look to the future, let's remember the example of Enheduanna and strive to uphold her values of courage, resilience, and cultural pride. Much of what we know about her comes from her own writings, specifically a collection of 40 hymns known as the Hymn of Enheduanna. Scholars believe that Enheduanna's father was the powerful King Sargon of Akkad, who ruled over the Akkadian Empire. Her mother was the priestess of Inanna, making Enheduanna a member of the royal family and giving her unique access to religious authority. Many of these hymns are addressed to the goddess Inanna, whom Enheduanna served as a priestess. And those are epic tales, tales worth telling and remembering. But there are other stories, quieter stories that deserve to be told just as much. Stories of ordinary people living extraordinary lives, stories of quiet courage and gentle strength. These are the stories of women. She received an elite education, learning how to read and write and mastering the complex rituals of Mesopotamian religion. She excelled in her role as a priestess, and her hymns show a deep understanding of the religious beliefs and practices of her time. She was not a pawn on someone's board game anymore. She was free. And in her freedom, she gave voice to generations of women. Kings sent messengers to escort her home. Queen came to sit at her feet, bartering for a single scrap of papyrus, anxious to copy down each phrase, each cadence. For she had been the king's daughter once. She had been a priestess of Ishtar, touched by the divine fire. And now she was nothing. To those who knew Enheduanna's hymns, Inanna was none other than the high priestess herself, her own spirit distilled into verse. And by night, when the moon hung fat and silver in the velvet sky, she wrote hymns, invocations, laments. Her words were carved into tablets and read aloud in sacred ceremonies. But even then, she made her way to the sanctuary of another god, the Lord of the Wilderness, weeping on his shoulder, pouring out her anguish. And he listened, patient, kind, and gave her refuge. She gave voice to the goddess Inanna, as distant myth, but as tempest, as woman, as flame. Inanna, they called her Lady of Heaven and Earth, Queen of the Underworld. But power in any form draws envy, and Enheduanna's pen was too sharp for some. The courtiers, scheming, backbiting, hungry for the throne, they whispered poison in the king's ear, turned his heart against his daughter. Perhaps it was a coup, swift and brutal. One moment she is a high priestess, the next she is dragged from the temple, her robes torn, her head shaved, her hands bound behind her back. Her hymns speak of it, that day when the city gates were shut against her, that day when her father banished her, stripped her of her rank, cut her from the family line. She fled then, or perhaps she was driven out, a doll thrown carelessly from a tower window, stumbling through the tall grass, tears streaming down her face, choking on dust and despair. For many years she wandered, living on charity, begging for scraps of food, sleeping under the open sky, praying at every shrine. Yet all the while, she never stopped writing, scribbling down verses on scraps of papyrus, carving them into clay tablets, singing them to the wind. And her audience grew larger, ever larger, until soon she was reciting in a great hall, a noble lord at her side, a scribe taking down her words. And slowly, surely, Enheduanna found her way back, not to the life she once had, but to something better, something more. When men tell stories, they often speak of daring deeds and mighty conquests, of slaying dragons and leading armies. Her hymns survive, copied by hand, by priests and princes, by kings and queens, by scholars and servants, by lovers and lunatics. And in doing so, Enheduanna became the first named author in history, a woman not only seen, but remembered. What makes a people great? Is it towering monuments or ingenious inventions? Here we are then, at the end of our journey, not with an answer, but with a question. Enheduanna was born around 2300 BCE and died sometime around 2250 BCE. She lived in the ancient Mesopotamian city of Ur. The hymns paint a vivid picture of Mesopotamian religion and culture, as well as providing insights into Enheduanna's own life. As the daughter of the king and priestess of Inanna, Enheduanna enjoyed a privileged upbringing. But Enheduanna's life took a dramatic turn. When she was exiled from her temple, despite her exile, Enheduanna continued to write hymns in praise of Inanna. Although little is known about Enheduanna's later life, it's clear that she continued to write hymns and play an important role in the religious life of her community. The legacy of Enheduanna, however, goes far beyond her own lifetime. Enheduanna's story is a reminder that even in the face of adversity, it's possible to find strength and resilience. What do you think is the oldest piece of writing ever? Leave your answer in a comment below. Then find out if you're right. Now we turn the page again to something older still, something carved not just into clay, but into the collective memory of civilization. The Epic of Gilgamesh. In a ruined library in Nineveh, a shattered tablet was found. Tablet She. It tells of a man named Utnapishtim, a man warned by a god to build a great boat, to carry his family and beasts of the field, because a flood was coming. A flood to wash away the wickedness of man. Does it sound familiar? Evidence suggests that wolves approached human settlements in search of food scraps, and the tamer ones were kept as pets. The earliest known winery, where grapes were fermented into wine, dates back to Georgia in the Caucasus region and is estimated to be around 8,000 years old. This system utilized a wedge-shaped mark impressed into clay tablets using a reed stylus. It featured a series of interconnected lines and curves inscribed on stone or rock surfaces. This script facilitated communication across vast distances and was primarily employed for trade and tribal affiliations. The earliest Epi-Olmec script merged around 600 BC in the tropical lowlands of the present-day Mexican states of Tabasco and Veracruz. It utilized a combination of logograms and phonograms to represent words or parts of words. It consists of phonetic characters representing individual sounds and is used primarily for religious texts, epics, and philosophical treatises. However, the introduction of native phonetic scripts, such as hiragana and katakana, allowed for a more flexible and accurate representation of Japanese. It's a phonetic script consisting of individual characters representing syllables, and is notable for its scientific and rational approach to writing. The script influenced the development of many other writing systems in South and Southeast Asia. Minuscule scripts were used extensively in manuscripts, facilitating the production of books and the spread of knowledge. During the Renaissance, printing innovations such as movable type led to the mass production of books, making written information more accessible to the public. The invention of the typewriter, and later computers, revolutionized the way written communication was produced and disseminated. The rise of digital media and the internet further transformed writing, enabling new forms of communication and collaboration. You might be surprised to learn it's hard to say. We haven't found every piece of writing from every culture. Plus, what counts as writing? Some experts argue it's anything that conveys meaning, while others prefer to focus on inscriptions carved in durable materials like stone. There are other challenges. Researchers must decipher the languages to determine the writing's purpose and historical context. The Maya script arose around 250 BC and flourished during the Classic period. From 250 to 900 AD, various genres of writing exist, such as novels, poetry, essays, journalism, technical writing, and creative writing. Effective writing involves clear and concise expression, logical organization, and the ability to engage and persuade readers. New finds push back the timeline and provide insights into the development of human civilization. As we continue to explore ancient cultures and decipher their languages, we gain a deeper appreciation for the complexity and ingenuity involved in creating these early forms of communication. Writers employ various techniques, including figurative language, imagery, and rhetorical devices to enhance their writing, while not considered a writing system in the traditional sense. Kihu may have had a significant role in record-keeping and information storage, possibly containing numerical and genealogical information. Primarily used for recording historical events, religious ceremonies, and astronomical observations. During the scientific revolution in the 16th and 17th centuries, new writing conventions and styles emerged, reflecting the emphasis on clarity and precision in scientific and mathematical texts. During the Romantic era in the 18th and 19th centuries, writers experimented with different writing styles and forms, often emphasizing emotion and individualism. The Mixtec script developed around the year 1000 AD and was employed by the Mixtec people of the Valley of Oaxaca. It combined pictographic and alphabetic elements to record genealogical lineages, important events, and the activities of nobility. Initially, Scribes used pictograms representing objects, but later abstract symbols emerged. They were commonly used to decorate tombs and temples, showcasing scenes from mythology, daily life, and historical events. The Rosetta Stone, discovered in 1799, provided the key to deciphering hieroglyphs due to its inscribed Greek text, allowing scholars to understand Egyptian writing and unlock a wealth of historical knowledge. Initially, oracle bone script was inscribed on turtle shells and tortoise plastrons used for divination purposes. Later, bronze vessels known as ding were used as writing surfaces. By the Spring and Autumn period, around 772–446 BC, writing evolved to include simplified characters and record historical events, philosophical ideas, and literary works. Chinese writing remained largely unchanged until the 20th century. Cuneiform developed into a complex language capable of expressing nuanced meanings, and became the primary writing system throughout Mesopotamia. Its influence extended to various kingdoms and empires, including the Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. One of the most famous pieces of cuneiform script is the Code of Hammurabi, a collection of 282 rules or laws that served as one of the earliest known legal codes. Agriculture enabled settled communities and eventually cities, leading to a specialization of labor and the development of writing. Writing initially served religious functions. Priests would inscribe clay tablets with prayers and incantations to appease gods and ensure favorable outcomes. Over time, writing evolved to record economic transactions and historical events. Dogs quickly proved useful. It could help drive animals toward human hunters or alert them to danger. Archaeological findings indicate that cattle were among the first species domesticated for meat, milk, and leather. Humans selectively bred animals for certain traits such as size and temperament over many generations. Interestingly, an examination of bones from 2 young pups found at a Neolithic site in Israel revealed signs of unusual stress consistent with domestication. They likely descended from East African wild dogs and were approximately 9,000 years old, indicating that domestication occurred relatively early in the development of agriculture. Yes, it predates the story of Noah by more than 1,000 years. The story tells of rains that fell for days, of a sea that covered even the mountain tops, of a bird sent out to find land. The flood receded, a sacrifice was made, a covenant spoken. Why would you tell this story? Why did so many ancient peoples carry flood myths? Perhaps because rivers life-giving and cruel shaped their world. When the Tigris and Euphrates rose too high, villages vanished. Fields turned to mud. So they told stories of cosmic resets, of divine judgment, and scribes preserved them, carefully copying lines by lamplight, creating stories already old, when pyramids were still rising. Even now, as you lay here in the stillness of a modern night, echoes of those floods drift through literature, through religion, through metaphor. Clay tablets, once lost and buried, now speak again. This is the narrator from the series. And today, we're answering the extraordinary question. What do we actually know about writing? Writing, the foundation of human record, may have originated earlier than the written word itself. Early humans relied on oral tradition to pass down knowledge, history, and culture. This practice helped preserve traditions despite frequent disruptions caused by the changing climate. For instance, during the last ice age, people had to regularly abandon their settlements when they could no longer sustain themselves there. However, when the climate warmed and people began to settle down once again, it seems they brought these stories with them and retold them around their hearths. But who was listening? Animals. Archaeologists have discovered evidence that early humans interacted with animals in surprising ways. They kept some as pets, while others assisted them in hunting or herding other animals. When humans first domesticated dogs, it happened sometime between 26,000 and 14,000 years ago. That means dogs are among the oldest human companions. Humans also formed unique relationships with plants, intentionally planting seeds that produced desirable foods like wheat and barley, which are grains used for bread, beer, and animal fodder. The earliest known system of writing, cuneiform script, originated around 2000 BC in Mesopotamia. Meanwhile, on the Arabian Peninsula, Thamutic script emerged around 400 BCE, predominantly used by nomadic Arab tribes. In Egypt, Hieroglyphic script developed around 3000 BC. Hieroglyphs were pictorial symbols that represented sounds, words, or concepts. In Mesoamerica, three major writing systems developed independently. Chinese writing originated around 2000 BC during the Shang dynasty. The Sanskrit alphabet developed around 800 BC in the Indian subcontinent and is one of the world's oldest continuous writing systems still in use today. In Japan, the writing system initially consisted of logographic and phonetic characters adopted from Chinese. In Korea, the Hangul alphabet was created in the 15th century by King Sejong the Great. In the Western Hemisphere, the Inca people of Peru kept detailed records on a type of knotted string called quipu.
Ow!
During the Middle Ages in Europe, writing continued to evolve with the development of minuscule scripts, which replaced the more elaborate script. With the advent of paper and pencil, writing became more convenient and widespread. The 20th century, writing adapted to new technologies and media. Today, writing serves numerous purposes, including record-keeping, education, entertainment, persuasion, personal expression, and social interaction. So how old is the oldest piece of writing? However, thanks to ongoing archaeological discoveries and advancements in technology, our understanding of writing continues to evolve. If you enjoyed this episode, check out this playlist for more information on similar topics. Thanks for watching. You are a scribe in the service of the king. Your days are filled with recording the decrees of the royal court, keeping track of taxes owed, the livestock on the king's estates, the grain harvest, the shipments of copper ingots arriving from the mines in the mountains, the number of soldiers ready to fight the next battle. It is large by Mesopotamian standards, the largest house you've ever seen. In fact, the outer wall is over 200 feet in circumference. That would be like wrapping yourself around a cedar tree more than 30 times. The mud brick walls are white, though the paint is chipped and faded to the color of old bone. Reed mats cover the floor. It would take centuries for any single ruler to unite the region. The cities were laid out in a grid pattern with the main temple dedicated to the city's patron deity in the center. Women could own property and were involved in religious rituals, but their role was primarily domestic. Slavery was common, with many slaves being prisoners of war. Slaves could be owned by individuals or temples and were considered property with no rights. If captured in war, men, women, and children could be taken as booty and sold into slavery. Religion played a central role in everyday life. The Sumerians believed in a pantheon of gods, each representing a different aspect of nature.
Those guys.
The chief god was An, the sky father, whose consort was Enlil, god of the earth. Other important deities included Enki, the creator god, and Inanna, goddess of love and fertility. Ziggurats were not only centers of religion, but also learning, housing libraries containing thousands of clay tablets. Priests were responsible for maintaining the temples and conducting rituals to ensure the gods' favor. Ziggurats, or stepped pyramid towers, were built for the gods, sometimes containing living quarters for priests and scholars. His manners are impeccable, the result of his mother's influence. He asks you to help him practice his reading, and you find yourself reciting the hymns of the great kings of old. After the initial awkwardness fades away, you and the young man share a plate of dates and sip on sweet wine, laughing as you recall the day's journey. Homes were made of either mud brick or sun-baked bricks, faced with a thin coating of glazed tile. What did you think? Did you enjoy seeing what it was like to be a scribe in the land of the Akkadians? How would you feel about living in a palace like the generals? Tell us in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an exciting episode of Mesopotamia. Wealthy homes had courtyards and gardens, complete with fish ponds and trees brought in from the countryside. While most Sumerians worked as farmers, growing barley, dates, and vegetables, there were also scribes, merchants, artisans, priests, and government workers. Most of these jobs were hereditary, meaning a son would usually take over his father's position. Scribes were responsible for keeping records and writing letters, which required a knowledge of cuneiform, a writing system using wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay tablets. Since the Sumerians did not have paper, the tablets were made from soft clay that could easily be molded, then dried in the sun. With the advent of the wheel, trade became easier and safer. Merchants traveled to distant lands to sell their goods, returning home with raw materials that could be worked into finished goods by artisans. Some common goods produced were textiles, furniture, jewelry, and metal tools. During peacetime, the Sumerian army consisted of foot soldiers armed with swords and daggers, archers and charioteers. Chariots were pulled by donkeys or horses and were used both for transportation and in warfare. By the year 2350 BC, the Akkadians would rise to prominence. Under their king Sargon the Great, the empire would grow to encompass much of modern Iraq, Kuwait, Turkey, and Syria. The Akkad was a cultural melting pot, allowing conquered peoples to keep their customs and languages as long as they paid their taxes. When the empire fell to the Amorites, the Sumerians would continue to thrive, becoming known as the most cultured of the Mesopotamian peoples. Their hymns and folk tales would become part of the foundation for the Babylonian Empire and later the Assyrians. The Sumerians were also known for their advances in science and mathematics, inventing the concept of zero and making advancements in astronomy. They were keen observers of the skies, tracking the paths of the planets and recording their positions in the first known star catalogs. Many Sumerian folktales served to explain natural phenomena they witnessed. One myth held that the moon was once a beautiful woman who was transformed into a ball of cheese, which the gods then threw up into the sky. Within each room, windows let in the hot sunlight and coils of incense slowly make their way upward toward the flat roof. The scent is sweet and cloying. Servants hurry about, bringing trays of food to the guests. You can see grilled lamb shanks, pickled cucumbers, lentils cooked with garlic, sweet beer, and fermented fruit wine. The guests eat with their hands. Numbers everywhere, and the responsibility of ensuring they are all correct weighs heavily on you. Each week we will bring you stories of ancient history, set in the cradle of civilization between the rivers of the Tigris and Euphrates. We will visit the great empires of Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria, and explore the world they lived in through their myths, their history, and their everyday lives. Join us as we learn what it was really like to live before the kings of Egypt ruled the known world. Don't forget to subscribe to get more adventures every Thursday. You need a holiday. He offers you a date to eat and sweet wine to drink. He tells you to put aside the worries of your daily life and enjoy yourself. Let us end with a softer vision, a night of music and flickering oil lamps, of wine in golden cups, of honeyed dates and perfumed garments. You are no longer a scribe. Tonight you are the guest of an Akkadian noble. The home is large by Mesopotamian standards, mud brick walls painted in faded colors. Reed mats cover the floor, incense coils lazily upward. Servants bring trays of grilled lamb, pickled cucumbers, lentils with garlic, sweet beer, and fermented fruit wine. You eat with your hands. Conversation is quiet, measured. Poetry is recited. Harps are played. The noble's wife sits nearby. She wears fine wool robes adorned with beads of lapis lazuli. She offers you a riddle to solve, a polite challenge. Round you, the elite discuss omens in the stars, rumors from Elam, and the price of tin in the marketplace. Even leisure is ceremony. Games of yore are played flat boards with etched symbols, stones cast for chance. Laughter is rare and subdued. For outside these walls, life remains unpredictable. Wars simmer, crops fail. Gods must be appeased. But for now, within this small space, lit by flickering flame, the Akkadian elite eat, speak, and remember. And luckily, your patron, the royal treasurer, has invited you to the house of his friend, a newly ennobled general who has just returned from the war with the Elamites. You have been warned that generals are boorish and uncouth, but surely one of the king's trusted servants would not invite you to a house of debauchery. Would he? We're given a small pouch of silver for spending money, a new reed pen for record-keeping, and a length of fine linen cloth to serve as a blanket while you travel. It will be a long walk. The roads are good and merchants travel them often, so it should be a pleasant journey. Step into the warm sunlight and start out. It is the custom of the time to dress modestly. You wear a simple tunic, ankle length, belted at the waist and tucked into linen trousers. Around your head you have wrapped a checkered cloth to shield you from the sun and to keep any dust out of your eyes. On your back, you carry the blanket in a leather satchel, along with a few personal items. You walk alongside other travelers. There are merchants with pack animals laden with textiles and metalwork, young lovers holding hands. a gaggle of children chasing a stray dog, and even a priest with his shaved head and long beard pushing along a broken cart. As you stop to rest by a tree, you see a peasant woman breastfeeding her child. Her husband is missing, no doubt off working the fields. You wonder if this general's house will have any children playing around it. Will there be a mother to nurse them? You hope so. War is terrible. The road eventually gives way to a wide street lined with houses. You have arrived at the general's home. Welcome to Mesopotamia. This is the first episode of a new series. The noble greets you warmly, ushering you inside to wash your hands and relax after your journey. Sumer, the oldest of the Mesopotamian city-states. Began its existence somewhere around the year 2600 BC. Sumerian cities were built of sun-baked bricks and protected by thick walls. Akkadian society placed a strong emphasis on family and social standing, with the male head of the household having ultimate authority. As evening sets in, the general's son approaches you, offering you a seat next to him on a reed mat. Join us next week to hear about the great Gilgamesh and his adventures in the wild. So, you've traveled now across the soft contours of Mesopotamian life, from hunched children in dusty schoolyards to exiled poets whose voices defied oblivion, from the mystery of flood myths to the quiet feasts of the powerful. It was a world shaped not by grand monuments or thunderous battles, but by clay, ink, and ritual, by repetition, by memory. And though the rivers have long shifted their course, though the cities are buried beneath layers of time, the tablets remain, soft impressions, lines pressed by tired hands.
Ow.
Stories carried across millennia. Sleep now, if you haven't already.
Ow.
The scribes of old have written enough for tonight, and the clay cools once more. Welcome. Tonight, we drift back in time to a place of powdered grandeur, heavy silks, and flickering candlelight, to a palace that glitters in memory, but hummed with quiet misery behind its walls. This is not the Versailles of kings and queens, but of those who swept the floors beneath their feet. From the silent servants who shaped each dawn, to a mistress who rose too high, from the secrets built into the walls, to the lonely path of a royal child. As you settle in, allow the soft rhythm of the past to carry you away. Let the whisper of history surround you like the rustle of courtly fabric, leading you through the endless marble corridors of a palace that never truly slept. Our journey tonight follows 4 tales, 4 glimpses into lives lived in the shadow of splendor. And now, gently, we begin. Let's just make one thing clear. This is not a game. This is not a joke. We're now entering the French historical drama of the 17th and 18th centuries, where everything is political. When Sun King Louis XIV ruled France, he ruled like God over his people. His court at Versailles was a grand spectacle, with decadent parties and endless affairs. But behind closed doors, there were whispers and schemes to overthrow him and take his throne. You are a nobody, trying to survive in an environment full of egotistical and ambitious people. The Sun King's La Roi Soleil rose each morning precisely at 6 a.m. You moved through the labyrinthine corridors of the palace, carrying messages, fetching items, anticipating the needs of the nobles before they even realized them. Versailles was a maze of mirrors and marble, and you, a humble servant, knew its secrets better than anyone. Betrayals ran deep, alliances shifted like sand, and power struggles could topple even the mightiest. You saw ambition twist faces, heard confessions under the cloak of night, and bore silent testimony to the ruthless pursuit of the crown. You navigated this treacherous landscape with caution, knowing that one misstep could lead to ruin. You learned to navigate the twists and turns of the halls with ease, memorizing the location of every chamber pot, every broom closet. Unlike the carefree nobles, you had no safety net. Such liaisons could expose them to venereal diseases or worse, attract the attention of the king's musketeers, whose presence at Versailles ensured order, or did it. But such bonds were fragile. The fear of being betrayed or denounced to the authorities was ever present. They patrolled the grounds, keeping watch over the nobles and, yes, the servants too. Crossing their path could spell trouble. There's no family name to protect you, no influential friends to advocate for you. Scarcity of kindness, empathy, and most of all, food. Yet without you, the grand machinery of Versailles would grind to a halt. Your existence was a paradox, unseen yet indispensable. You were the ghosts of the palace, haunting its halls, keeping its secrets, and paying the ultimate price for its sins. Long hours and a lack of rest were the norm. When you finally retreated to your attic room, exhaustion weighed heavy on your eyelids. A dropped tray of dishes, a missed button, or a smudge on the window pane could result in harsh punishments. Over time, you learned to move through the palace with robotic precision, anticipating the needs of the nobility. Before they even realized them, your body knew the routes by heart. Your hands worked with clockwork precision. Mistakes were not just costly, they were catastrophic. A misplaced garment could ruin a noble's reputation. Poorly timed delivery could disrupt an important meeting. A forgotten message could cost someone their head. Finding rest was impossible with the constant fear of being summoned for some urgent task, keeping you on edge. The attic room you shared with other servants offered little respite. Cramped, dirty, and dimly lit, it was a far cry from the luxurious chambers of the nobility. Sharing a room with other servants meant exposure to diseases, lice, and fleas. Privacy was a myth, and personal belongings were often shared. The attic became a sanctuary from the prying eyes of the nobles, but it offered little comfort or peace. The lavish feasts enjoyed by the nobles were a world away from the meager rations you received. Polished floors, spotless linen, and gleaming silverware were its oil, and you, a simple servant, were one of the cogs that kept it running. Hunger pangs were a constant companion, and the attic where you slept with other servants was as cold as the winter hearth. Comfort was a luxury you could not afford. Your worth was measured in the flawless execution of your duties. Make a mistake, no matter how small, and you risked being branded as incompetent. Worse still, you could become a pawn in someone else's game, a misplaced item, a forgotten message, and suddenly you were caught in a web of deceit and intrigue. Every well-placed vase that could trip up an unsuspecting noble. It meant becoming a master of disguise. You needed to read between the lines, understand the unspoken rules, and anticipate the hidden agendas. Every smile, every nod, every whispered word was a piece of a puzzle, and you had to assemble it correctly to survive. These leftovers might include stale bread, scraps of cheese, or a watery soup. Competition for these rations was fierce, and getting a full meal was never guaranteed. Some servants turned to stealing, pilfering food from the kitchens or the dining halls. The risk of being caught and punished was high, but the alternative was gnawing hunger. Familiarity bred comfort, and in the rigid hierarchy of Versailles, that meant you were somewhat indispensable. Whether the sun had risen or not was irrelevant. His internal clock demanded this precise routine. Servants like you were part of the set design, enhancing the grandeur, but never stepping into the spotlight. You watched as nobles engaged in elaborate dances of courtship, their words as sharp as swords, their smiles as fleeting as the morning mist. Love affairs flourished and withered within these gilded walls. And you, a silent witness, carried the notes and letters that sealed their fates. Some nobles sought your discretion, others did not care. Gossip was currency at Versailles, and you found yourself at the center of a whispering network. What you heard in the hushed tones of a bedroom or the privy could end up fueling the next scandal at the dinner table. The entire palace was designed to revolve around the Sun King. His day began in the bedroom, where his valet helped him dress in fine garments and lace, powdered his wig to perfection, and ensured that his red heels shone like rubies. As a servant, you might be tasked with polishing these very shoes or tying the king's elaborate cravat. Each movement was choreographed, each gesture laden with symbolism. It was a performance as much as it was a preparation for the day. You have no idea who will betray you next. Will you be the next victim of the deadly Game of Thrones? Or will you be the one who claims the Iron Throne? Welcome to our channel. And today we will show you what your life would be like as a servant at Versailles. Waking up in the morning, you wake up in a cramped attic room with other servants. Your value depended entirely on the whims of those you served. Your days begin early. Unlike your noble employers, you do not enjoy leisurely mornings. Instead, you rush to complete your assigned tasks, ensuring that the palace is ready for the rising sun and the awakening nobility. The smell of stale waste and stale breath fills the air. Sunlight streams through grimy windows, illuminating swirls of dust dancing in the air. Your workday starts even before your eyes are open. As one of the many domestics employed at the Palace of Versailles, your schedule is dictated by the needs of the aristocracy, particularly the Sun King himself. Your duties could range from menial tasks like scrubbing chamber pots and polishing shoes to more intricate roles, like assisting noblewomen with their attire or delivering secret love letters. Versailles demands constant vigilance. Every polished floor, every spotless window reflected the meticulous attention required to maintain the facade of perfection. The success or failure of your work often went unnoticed. That is, until something is amiss. Versailles was both a spectacle and a prison, and as a servant, you were part of its soul without ever truly being seen. In the grand halls of Versailles, there existed a sacred ritual known as the lever, or a rising ceremony. But your role in this performance was not as grand. While the king basked in the adoration of his court, you were backstage, unseen yet essential. Versailles was also a stage. Every interaction, every conversation was a play. The Sun King's court was a battlefield, and the stakes were high. The weight of your responsibilities pressed down on you like a shroud. For you, survival at Versailles meant more than just staying out of the crossfire. Versailles, despite its opulence, was a place of scarcity too.
Ow.
Meals for servants consisted of whatever was left after the nobles had dined. At times, the desperation was so great that servants resorted to selling their bodies in taverns and brothels to buy food. This was a dangerous game. There were rumors of secret societies among the servants, groups who banded together to share their meager rations, offer solace in hard times, or even plot against the cruel overlords of Versailles. To make matters worse, sleep was a rare commodity for servants. Versailles was not just a palace, it was a machine that thrived on appearances. The relentless pressure to perform without error made mistakes unforgivable. In the intricate game of Versailles, where power and prestige were the currency, you were the small change, easily overlooked, easily replaced.